All right, hi everybody. This is just a quick demo on how to ink up your linoleum block and how to create a temporary palette for your ink. So I've cut up the box for the brayer. I'm going to use this as our palette. I have my block, a palette knife, we have some ink, we have the Baron, and we have some newsprint. I set the newsprint aside, the block aside for a second, and I am going to get us some ink. So the best way to get ink, even if you don't have a piece of plastic or a piece of glass or plexiglass to do this on, you can just open up the ink. Be careful, it can be a bit sticky or inky, if you would. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna put a dollop of ink. Take your palette knife. We're gonna put a dollop of ink right here, like this. This is water-based ink and oil-based ink, so it can be cleaned up with solvent or water, and I'll be showing that to you here shortly, how to clean that up. Then you take your brayer, like this, and you can roll it out. You could even, if you think you have too much ink, you can come over here and reduce the amount of ink. So that's a good amount of ink. We might have to add a little bit more, we'll see. Now I'm going to set this aside and I'm gonna get my wood block. Okay, now watch this, this is kind of fun. This is what's come to life. I know that some of you have probably already done this, but this is a good review. Now look at this. Now there's some things to think about when you're using your brayer. Notice that it leaves lap marks like this. We call this lap marks. This is where the roller rolls and then hits its lap, hits its circumference. So what you need to do is just ink up your brayer, come over it. And what I've noticed I'm doing, I'm kind of lifting it up and rolling it. And you can see your image come to life. I'm gonna get a little more ink out. Now, how you know you're done is that of course you can see it, but you can also hear it. The question is, how much ink do you put on? Well, it's kind of up to you, really. It's kind of like taste. It's kind of like the question of how much salt do you put on. You don't want to put on too much salt, but you can put on a little bit because you don't want a lot. Or you could put on a lot and see what happens. It's really not, there's really no right or wrong. If you put on too much ink, it can get messy. If you put on too little, your print will print kind of light. So sometimes I rotate the block like this. Now what's cool about this, using your palette, using your box as a palette, is that you can reuse this for quite a while. We don't need to clean it. We can just leave the ink on it. It'll dry and we'll be able to use it again. You know what I mean? It won't necessarily be wet ink anymore, but you can reuse it and reuse it. And then when you're done with it, you can throw it away. So cardboard is a nice palette in a pinch, especially this kind of smooth cardboard. So now do you hear that ink? I'm just gonna. So that's the sound you actually want to hear. You don't want it to be too noisy. And you also want to be careful not to put too much ink, because if you put too much ink on, you can fill in these smaller V-gouge marks. So there's like this fine line, but even that that's not a bad thing. That's just kind of to taste. That's why I like using salt as the reference point. There are some little goobers and stuff floating around here, but that's okay. Now I'm gonna get a piece of newsprint from the news pad. I'm just gonna tear off a piece of newsprint, one piece. And then newsprint's great because it prints really well. You can move your palette and your brayer out of the way. Now you're gonna need your burin. And you set this down on the block. Now, the trick, you use this felt side to get the ink to stick to the paper. Like that. Then you use this hard side to do the printing. And you can check to see how it's printing by looking. See, you can kind of see the print there. What I do is start on one side and then move towards me. And you want to kind of overlap your marks, so that it's kind of like mowing your lawn or something, or I don't know. It's not like knitting, but you want to kind of overlap, because if you don't overlap, you can get kind of marks from the back of the brayer. Go around the edges. You can also rotate it if you want, like this. And this will give a good printing. And then we'll pull it off. Voila. There's our print. Isn't that cool? Now we have a couple goobers on here that I can clean off, but this is just a proof, so it's no big deal. It's printing a little bit light here, but I actually kind of don't mind that. It kind of adds to the texture of the print. It's pretty cool, huh? All right, I'll make a separate video on how to clean up, but that's just a quick overview, how to ink up your plate and proof it on newsprint.